doing is we're going to be building basically a little scene that you would see basically like on a in a magazine. Okay, so just to give you an idea of different examples of different ads. There we go. Okay, these are a bunch of different products. Now for the assignment, we're building a specific scene. So I want you to build the exact scene that I'm building-ish, and then you can add stuff to it. Okay, so I don't want you to pick like completely different products or completely different things. I want you to build what we're going to build, and then you can add stuff to that specific one. So all of these are just different kinds of ads, and most of the time these things are going to be CG. At least enhanced with CG. Like this one didn't actually have the smoke coming off of it. They added the smoke onto it. Even like the images here, those may have been enhanced also. Oops. Zine ad. Even stuff like this is most likely not even like a real iPad. They actually just drew the iPad in Photoshop and then made it look like that. Okay, so I want you to get out of the mindset that everything is like photographed and they just like took a picture and they cropped it in Photoshop and dropped it onto it, because they don't. Lots and lots of work goes into creating these kinds of ads. So our product that we're going to be doing is a little breakfast scene. Breakfast. And I put it, nope, right there, preview. So there's our scene that we're going to create. Now inside here, we're building on the stuff that we've already done, right? So we've already done some basic modeling, like in our room, right? We learned how to build just some basic cubes and then deform the cubes. So now we're going to be getting into more advanced shapes like the bowl, like the glass, like the mug. The box is actually just a cube with some bevels on it. That's all the box is. The trickiest thing with the box, though, is the texture. Because how do we get that box to look the way that the box looks, okay? So that will be part of the trickiness. Also, it's hard to see from this angle, but there's coffee in the coffee mug, and there's orange juice in the glass back there. And here we have, it's Fruit Loops. I like Fruit Loops, so they're Fruit Loops. So we have Fruit Loops with some milk, okay? So how do we get all of these Fruit Loops into this bowl with milk and have it actually be in the bowl and not be just like colliding with each other or manually placing each piece, because that's definitely something we don't want to do. And then there's a spoon there as well, okay? You can work on it today. I'm going to go over the gist of, or the basic foundation of it, and then after this class, I will have the lectures pre-made, so they'll all be set and ready to go. Where is my scene? There's Fruit Loops inside the bowl here. There is coffee inside of this. And then there is orange juice inside of here, and then there's a straw coming out of there. And then here is this box. Now the box is textured on all sides. Now I grabbed an image for the box, but you will actually be making your own texture for the cereal box, okay? And then apart from these items that you see, you'll be able to build anything else you want here. So if you wanted to build like bacon, because that goes with any breakfast, you can put bacon. You want to build eggs, you could do that, okay? The idea is, if you look at the end result, there it is, there it is, there it is. This may not look 100% realistic, but it does look pretty close, right? So I want to keep that in mind. So if you do add anything like bacon or toast or whatever, that it looks along the same line. It doesn't look like a big garbled mess and it's just horrible looking, okay? So anything we add to the scene should add to the scene, not take away from it. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of the foundational stuff of this, of how I got started, and then we'll go from there. All right, so the first thing I did was I created the environment for this. Okay, now the environment to create, I got to keep this open so I stop closing it. The environment for this kind of thing here, this nice little backdrop, if you look at any photo stuff or if you've studied photography, whenever they take pictures, they basically have like this L-shaped cove where basically they don't have like a corner. And so we want to create that same kind of thing so we don't see a hard line coming in right here. We want to see a nice transition from our floor up to the wall. Okay, so I typically like to start off creating that. And that's actually really simple to do because all I do is I start off with a cube and I just make it enormous. So I go like this, I go like this, and I go like that. Okay, so there's a huge cube here and I can even make it bigger and make it wider and whatever else. All right, once I have this, I'm gonna hit C to make it into a shape. And I just want to go to faces and delete out each one of these. Okay, I don't need any of these pieces. Now when you delete stuff inside of Cinema, what happens is it deletes the faces, but it still keeps the vertices around. So you can see here, oops, here, I still have these vertices or these points that are still sticking around. So I'm going to delete those also. They don't do anything, they're not going to hurt anything, but they're just annoying to see when I go into that. All right, so here's my cove. So I'm going to scoot it up like that. And one thing that always, like in Maya, when you zoom out, it looks like you've zoomed out. In Cinema, what it does is it resizes the grid every time you've zoomed out. So here, that plane looks pretty small compared to the rest of the scene. But then as I zoom in, you can see how big this is going to actually be, okay? So the idea is that the stuff that we build will fit within this grid, okay? Or within this area. Now we can always resize this if we need to, so don't be stuck on, I need to get this perfect, okay? So here's the square, here's the corner. I need to round off this edge. So remembering back to our first assignment where we were doing the room, what tool might I use to round off a corner? Nope. Starts with a B. Bevel.
Yeah,
yep.
sorry.
So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to click on that. I have to make sure I'm clicked on the edge. I hit M to bring up my tools, and I can hit S to get to bevel. Now, just so you can see it too, under the, I'm so used to going to the other one. Create tools, transform tools, commands, there we go. Under any of these tools that we go to, you'll see that there's a lot of these tools that are right here. So here's commands, here's converting things, here's creating tools, here's transforming tools. So under the create tools, you'll see Bevel's hotkey is MS, right? So if I hit M, then I hit S, it'll just bring me right to Bevel. Some of these will have a second hotkey, like Extrude has D. So Extrude, you can simply hit D and it'll bring up the Extrude without needing to hit M and then D, okay? So Bevel does not have that, so I still need to hit the MS, right? So MS, there it is. I'm going to click and drag and add a bevel to that, okay? And then I'm going to add some subdivisions to keep it nice and round. There we go, perfect. All right, so I'm going to go back to object mode, and that's pretty much done, okay? That's all that takes. I just created a cube, beveled it, deleted those faces I didn't need beforehand, and then I'm going to relabel this as my backdrop. I'm also going to add it to a layer. So one of the things we need to start doing even more now is starting to organize our stuff. Our Gotham scene, our title sequence, we had basically 1 or 2 pieces of geometry and the rest was lights and cameras and other stuff. Really didn't have a whole lot of stuff going on. In this scene, you're going to have a lot of stuff going on, okay? So we want to make sure we're staying organized. So I'm going to add a new layer from the object selection. I test it by hitting the V, that way I know, or the eyeball, I know that it's turning on and off. And I can just call this the backdrop. Now I don't want to touch the backdrop now, I just want to lock it. Yes, ma'am.
When you make a new layer, is it possible to like group stuff too? Or?
Yes, once we create more things in here, we'll be grouping things together and then adding them into the layer. So like my cereal bowl, I want to group all my cereal stuff together so that it stays right there. I also want to put all that on the same layer. So at any of these, we could right click and add objects to layer or remove all from, remove unused layers, delete all, whatever, okay? So I'm going to lock this, so I hit the little lock. And so now I can't select that background in accident and move it and destroy what I've done. All right, so that stuff is pretty much what we've already done before, right? We did that in our room, right? We deleted one of the faces. We've done bevels before. We've added it to a layer, nothing new. So the next thing that we're going to learn is about splines. So splines are essentially curves, okay? So think of Illustrator when you draw paths. It's kind of like the foundation of building stuff inside of Illustrator. So part of modeling stuff is by using splines and then using these curves or splines to create actual surfaces. So I'm going to create my juice glass, and then I'll create some other things using splines, okay? So I'm going to use this pen tool. Now we don't want to draw them in here. I'm in perspective, and if I start clicking, okay, it's not drawing it flat. You can see how it's drawing it like in this weird 3D space. Okay, so anytime we draw a curve or a spline, I want to middle click to open up my 4 views, and then go into one of my other views. So for something like my bowl or my glass, I want to basically use my front view or my side view. So right view or front view. Doesn't matter which, really. Okay. Now looking at this, I'll have a good idea of how big to make my stuff. Because if I'm zoomed way out like this and I make it that big, obviously I'm going to have to scale it down. So I'm using that, and that's kind of why I build that first. I'm using that as my reference for how big I want these things to be. And part of the nice thing about Cinema is that as you zoom in, you actually get grid lines closer and closer. All right, so there it is. So this black line here is where my plane stops. So I'm going to kind of zoom in pretty close here, and I'm going to start to draw my curve. Now I want to stay locked into the grid. I want to stay so that this thing like connects right to the grid so that it's nice and even. If I don't, just to show you, I'm going to draw basically like if you cut the glass in half, what you would see on one side of it. Okay, so I'm going to draw the inside of my glass. I'm going to go here. You can see how I'm drawing this. There we go. So you can see how it's not very accurate, how I can't really get these things lined up. There it's closed, but it looks kind of off and chunky. Okay. So I want to turn on my snapping. So back to spline, back to pen. Cool. So snapping is down here. Shortcut key is Shift S. Again, if you don't remember your shortcut keys, use them so that you don't forget them. Inside of the snapping, there's a whole bunch of different ways you could snap to things. So you'll see down here, this is grid snapping. That's what I want. But grid snapping is grayed out. So I have to turn on this before I can turn on grid snapping. So I'm going to turn on work plane snapping. Then I can turn on grid point snapping. Okay. So now when I click, or I get close to a corner even, you'll see that it jumps right to that corner. That's what I want to happen. So I'm going to draw my glass. So I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to click a point. I'm going to go over a little bit. I'm going to click a point and then drag it a bit. Okay. Now you'll see it's kind of like Illustrator, where we're getting these bendy lines. Now you can't see it, but there's handles there. When I let go, you'll be able to see the point at least. Then I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to click another point here, and then drag it up. I'm going to click a point here, drag it up, come down here. I'm going to go below this one, and I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to come over here and then just click. Okay. Now once I'm done, I just hit enter or escape, and then I switch my tool. Okay. So this is my path that I've drawn. Now what I need to do is I need to tweak the path so that I could reshape it. So I'm going to go to my points. I'm going to click on a path, and what I want to do is not have the glass kind of cave in like this, because it's not really like a juice glass does that. A juice glass is pretty straight in what it does there. So you can see I can hold shift and break the constraint there. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to hold shift and break that so that this is straight. There we go there. So I'm just adjusting these handlebars so that, oops, come on, there we go, so that they have a nice little rounding to them. This one needs to be adjusted just a smidge. You may have to zoom in, obviously, to get right to it. There we go. Cool. And then I think this might be a little bit too rounded here, so I'm just going to pull this in and pull that in also. Okay, so you want to be a little bit meticulous on how you set those things up. There we go. Oops. There we go. Cool. All right. So now we have our glass. Now this isn't a completed glass, obviously. This is just a curve. But do you see how we drew just what that glass would look like if it was cut just like in quarters? Okay, so we're just seeing that one edge of it. So now I'm going to go back to object mode, and I'm just going to turn my snap off, and then just scoot this so that it's basically sitting right here on the bottom. Now when I started this and I ended this, I made sure that it lined up perfectly with that center point, because what we're going to do is called a lathe. So it basically will spin this item around and create the surface out of that. So I'm going to middle click and then middle click so I can get back to here so I can see where that glass is at. There it is. I'm going to go under my tools here, not there, my tools here, and you'll see this says lathe. And so when I click on it, it says, okay, here's a lathe, and I want to connect my spline to this lathe. A lot of things inside of Cinema are going to be hooked up like this, where all we do is drag this and make sure that it drops into it. Okay? So basically, like, here's the tool. We're dropping that curve into the tool, and it automatically will lathe that item or revolve that item. Maya calls it revolve. So now I have this juice glass. Now here's what is neat about this. We can turn off this little check mark, and the lathe goes away. We turn it back on. Oops, wrong button. We turn it back on, it comes back. So what this means is that we can actually go to our spline. I'm going to switch back to my view here, go back to my points, and I'm going to marquee the points and then just move them over. Okay? And then I could tap the space bar, grab these, move those up. I'm going to grab these 2 points, scoot this in. So now what I'm doing is I'm customizing what this glass is going to look like. Okay? So I'm just reshaping it. I don't have snap on here because realistically I just need a snap to get the base shape, and then I could tweak it after that. Okay? So I like the way this is looking better. Maybe I want to tweak, maybe I want to tweak some of these handlebars. You can see that it doesn't permanently break the tangents here, so I have to hold shift again after I start moving it, and then I could adjust the handlebars. Okay? So here, and this is kind of annoying how it's set up where the handlebar was right on top of it. There we go. So let's say I wanted my glass to look kind of like that. That's kind of neat. Okay? Now I want to see what it looks like. I turn my lathe back on, and there it is. Okay? Now the neat thing about this too is that using this one lathe, this one curve, I could create my glass, I could create my bowl, and I could create my coffee cup, like all in basically like one setup that I just duplicate and change as I go, right? So if I go back to my thing off like this, my glass is actually too big. It looks like a highball glass or something. So I need to shrink that over. So I'm just moving my points. That should be good. All right, so turn our lathe back on and check it out. And a little bit too rounded on the bottom still. So I'm going to hit this. Make sure I switch back to the move tool, and then I can shrink these in. It's a little bit too much rounding here is the issue. There we go. Just a little bit of rounding is a good amount. There we go. So that looks like a nice juice glass. All right, cool. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this setup here, this lathe, okay? And lathe, the way it's set up, it's kind of like a group. So that if I were to duplicate lathe, it would duplicate lathe and the curve and keep everything still connected so I could change anything I want. So I'm going to hold control and just drag this down. So now I have 2 of them. Okay, so there's my lathe. And then if I click on here, there's my spline. Okay? Now as I move that spline, you'll see what happens is it's updating the lathe. So I never want to move it like away from that point because you'll see we have a big hole in the center of this and that won't look good. If I move it up or down, that's not an issue because it's still centered. Okay? this line right here, it's still aligned with that. It's when I move it away from the line that we start to deform it, okay? Or even move it this way, you'll deform it even weirder. All right, so I made my, this one, which is my juice glass. So I can take my spline here, here, turn this lathe off, and then go to points. Make sure I'm clicking the right thing. Move this down here. And then start to shape this out for my cereal bowl. That should be good there. I'll pull this out like that. Okay, click my lathe back on, and there's my cereal bowl. Okay, so you're able to make, like I said, multiple shapes out of just one kind of setup. That's a huge bowl, by the way. Let me shrink that down a bit. There we go. That seems like a good size. Always look at the proportions. Look at the size of the cup. Look at the size of the bowl. Look at the rest of the scene. Make sure everything's still in relation to each other. On this one, if this cereal bowl was huge and my coffee cup was tiny, it would look really odd. So you're always kind of balancing this stuff out. We can resize things later, we can adjust things later, but we always want to look at that. All right, so let's say that I'm done with this. I never, ever, ever want to adjust my lathe again. I know what it looks like. I don't want to tweak it after this. So all I have to do is hit C, and now my lathe shape actually becomes an object, okay? So before that, it's basically just like we created a cube. It's like, how do you want the cube's shape to be? And you can tweak some of the settings. So that's what it does. So we hit C on the cube, we can edit it. Now we can edit this if we need to, okay? So I'm gonna hit undo for a second because I wanna go through some of these options. Because once we turn these options, or once we hit C, these options go away. So one of them is the angle. So for this assignment, doesn't really apply, but you may want to adjust the angle of this at some point because you have a need to have something that's like a cutout like that, okay? You may also want to have caps on your stuff. No, there's no caps on this, yeah, so no caps for this specific one. So I'm gonna leave this at 360 so it doesn't go past it. We also have subdivisions. Now with this, we can't really see the subdivisions. I'm gonna go to display and say garage shading or garage shading with lines. Now we can see the subdivisions. I'm gonna click and drag, and you can see how I can shrink this down or make it bigger to have more divisions. Now if we're tweaking something, like on my glass down here, I want to add more shape to it. I want to make it look a little bit fancier than it currently does. So for that, I want to make sure I have a good amount of points to do that. With this one, I'm not really going to be changing the shape of it too much, except I do want to pull the bottom out. I do want to extrude the bottom so it doesn't look like the bowl is just sitting right on the ground. I want to have basically like a little lip that it could sit on. Okay, so I'm aware of this kind of stuff here. So I'm going to take my subdivisions down to, let's say 12 here. I'll say a good number. And the reason I'm going so low with that number is because what I want to do is eventually I'll smooth the stuff out. Okay, so just like we did in our room when we took our desk and we smoothed it out, I want to do that too. So I know ahead of time I'm going to do that. Now we also have an ISO subdivision, or ISO parm subdivision. This is going the other direction. Okay, so we're not going to see too much happen with this unless I zoom in. Nope, I guess not. I don't see anything with that. We also have movement. I'm not sure what this does. There we go. Maybe just moves it. Yep. And we also have scaling in case you want to scale it. Doesn't really apply to this one. Okay, so that should be pretty good. Nothing with the caps. I do want. There's nothing here. That's just caps. Never mind. Okay. All right. So that should be good. So this surface is done. So I'm going to hit C on this one. Now it's always good to lock these things in when you're done because that way it's locked in. There's no chance of you accidentally moving that spline and screwing it up. Now on the other side, if I need to go back and tweak the shape of this one, I can't do it. I basically have to rebuild that shape or try to tweak this one here. So I'm going to go to my glass down here and tweak that shape. Okay, so I'm going to go to my lathe. I'm going to take my subdivisions down. 12 seems like a good number on this one, so I'll leave this at 12, not 11. You always want to do an even number, and typically something divisible by 4 is a good number to go with. Don't need anything with that. All right, that should be good. So then I'll hit C. There we go. All right, so that's cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my glass here, and I'm going to grab every other one of these, or every one of these faces. Okay, now there's a reason I'm not marqueing it. If I marquee it, it would also grab, not glab, it's not a word. It would also grab the faces on the inside of this. Okay, now I'm also running into this issue. I want to work on my glass, but the bowl is in the way. Okay, this will happen all the time. You have 20 objects in your scene, you're trying to focus on one without dealing with everything else. So let's go and organize these into layers. So if I grab the glass and I go to File, New Layer from Selection, and I call this Juice Glass. Okay. And then I come up here and I call this Juice Glass. A lot of places rename things. Cereal Bowl. And then new layer from that. Cool. Then what I can do is I can go to my juice glass, and this little S right here means solo. If I click it, it solos that one object, so I can focus on just that one object. Okay. So now that that object is soloed, now I can go back to faces, click on my juice glass. They're all selected. I think I want to just scale this up a bit and scoot it down a bit. Okay. One thing you never want to do is this, which is scale it past any other points. So you see these points that are down here and these points that are there. I never want to do that because it'll basically destroy the surface. Okay. So now we're getting this nice little lip right here, which is one of the things that I wanted on there too, is a nice little lip. If I didn't, I can go to Edges, double click this edge, and then just scale this in. And you'll see how I can get rid of that lip, or I can enhance the lip. Okay? Or I can kind of meet it like in the middle. All right, back to the faces. All right, so I'm going to take these faces here, and I'm going to extrude them. So, like I said before, I can hit M and then hit S. Oops, not S. I could hit, where'd you go? T. I hit M and T, and that'll take me to extrude. Or I can just hit D. Remember under this, extrude was MT or just D. So that's what I'm going to do. But actually I'm going to do a different kind of extrude first. I'm going to do the one below it, which is the Extrude Inner, and that one is I. Okay, so I'm going to hit I. Back to my attributes. I'm going to turn Preserve Groups off. So right now, if I were to extrude, you see how everything's staying together. I don't want everything to stay together. I want this to look like each panel, each face is a separate piece. Okay, so I turn Preserve Groups off, and then when I go through and tweak this, see how each one of these is basically a separate piece. Okay, then I'm going to go and hit D, and then I'm going to extrude it inward just a smidge. Okay, just like that. So it gives it just a little bit of a fancy design. That's all that's doing. Okay. Then I'm going to go back to object mode. I'm going to turn my wireframe off. I don't need to see it right now. Back to the move tool. There we go. Okay. So there's my juice glass. So now what I want to do is take the juice glass and put it into a smooth surface. I want to subdivide it with this so that it turns out nice and smooth. So I can click on this. You'll see that it doesn't show up. Why doesn't it show up? Go ahead. Right, because I've soloed it over here, right, under my layers. So if I have to make sure that this solo is off, then it'll show it on up here, okay? Now I could have added it into that layer and then it would have been fine, but it's all good. So I'm going to take my juice glass, I'm going to drop it into the subdivision, and then you'll see we get this glass that looks like that now, okay? So that's why I wanted to keep those divisions low, so that when I did this, I had these kind of thicker little chunks going through. Now, let's say I didn't want these to be so rounded here. I wanted maybe a little bit more crispness at the top and the bottom. I'm going to disable my subdivision surface, go back to the juice glass. I'm going to hit K for knife, because that's my hotkey for knife. I'm going to go to my edges. So many buttons to click. Turn restrict to selection off. Change this to loop, because all I want to do is just add a couple divisions. I want to add one division right here, and I want to add one division right there. Now I'm adding this like basically right before the bottom of that. Back to object mode, back to the move tool, subdivision surface is on, and now look at how fancy that one is. Okay, so there's different ways we can play with these surfaces, but it all starts with kind of that spline, converting it to a piece of geometry, and then keeping it low enough divisions that we can go ahead and tweak some of the stuff. Then I can turn this off again, because I want to just add a little bit more refinement to the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to grab this edge and just shrink that in. Maybe not. I'm going to shrink, make this one bigger and pull it up. You don't want to have any drastic changes in your glass. So like here, there's a pretty drastic movement right around here, and then I would be doing this and it would make it look funny, just so you can see it. You can see it kind of looks weird in how it's transitioning into that. So back to edges, back to that. Scale this up. There we go. I'm going to grab this edge and I'm going to shrink this in and then move that up. And then I'll shrink that one in just a smidge. There we go. All right, so that looks like a pretty neat juice glass there. Okay, so now to my bowl, I'm not really going to do anything to the bowl except for that bottom piece. Okay, the top of it's fine. So let me go back to my layers. I'll solo my cereal bowl. And then I'll grab the face on the bottom. Now, if this part takes too long, like clicking each one of these faces, there are other ways that we can select stuff. So under the select, there's a whole bunch of tools here that we could use, okay? So at some point, look through them just so you have basically a foundation for it. Loop selection is what I want. So if I go to loop selection, there we go, because it loops all the way around. So I can grab all of those with just one click, okay? Back to the move tool. Now I'm going to hit I to extrude it inward. So I extrude this inward like this. Now in this case, I want all the faces to be part of the same group. I don't want them to be separate. So if I go over here and say preserve groups, you can see how it locks all those together. Cool. So I'm just going to shrink that in some more. Right about there should be good. So I'm going to go to my loop selection and grab. It's kind of tricky because there's two loops, right? There's a loop that goes this way and a loop that goes that way. So you have to be kind of like on the edge here, and it'll select it that way. All right. So there's my loop that I'm going to pull out. I'm going to hit D and pull this outward. There we go. So now I have this little platform that my bowl would sit on. And then if I go to my layers, I unsolo this. I click my cereal bowl. I go to my subdivision and drop the cereal bowl into the subdivision. You'll see we get a nice little loop right here, a nice little platform for our bowl to sit on. Okay. Now you'll notice one thing that I haven't done. I haven't moved any of these objects away from where they were created, right? I haven't taken my cereal bowl and scooted it way off to the right. I haven't grabbed my juice glass and thrown it off into position. Everything you build should be built right at the center of your world, right at the center of your origin. Set it up exactly how you want it, and then scoot it over. It just makes your life a lot easier when you do that kind of stuff. Okay? So for instance, this juice glass is right here at the origin. It's right here, if I switch to this view, at the center point of my entire world, so that it doesn't move away. Because if I were to scoot this over here, let's say like back there, and then I decided, oh, I want to put juice in this. Well, now I have to move something and line it up perfectly with it and scale it and position it and do all this stuff all the way while it's over there. It's very difficult to do. Okay? Oops. So I'm going to put juice inside this cup. So I'm going to create a cylinder, and I'm going to scoot it up, scale it up, grabbing the wrong one. There we go. Okay, I'm going to go to my layers, and I'm going to add this to my juice glass. And then I'm going to solo it so I can just look at those two items. Okay. So I'm not concerned with the fact that this is tapered around here. Excuse me. And then the size of it doesn't match. I'm going to adjust that later. I do want to turn on my divisions so I can see my lines. And I just want to make sure that I don't have any vertical lines. Okay, there's nothing going this way. Okay, it's all perfectly, there's none of this, right? Just one division. My segments, I'm going to put this at 12 also. If you keep everything at 12, it just makes your life easier because everything's at 12. You know that it's at 12. So that if this is put into here, all the divisions will line up perfectly. Okay? So once that's in there, I'm going to hit C to make it an actual shape. I'm not sure why that's in the group. That shouldn't have been in the group. There we go. Somehow my cylinder or my juice glass got in that group. So I just pulled it out. So I'm going to go face now. I'm going to go to my face selection tool. And I'm going to grab all these faces. I'm going to turn off only select and turn off tolerant. Okay, there's another way to select all of those. Then I'm just going to move it down. Oh, geez, I forgot about that. I always forget about that. So let me grab this face again. When you make a cylinder, it's actually like 3 pieces. You have the top, you have the bottom, and you have this center section. So what I need to do is weld everything together. So I'm going to go to my points, make sure I'm selecting everything. Okay, so there's everything selected. I'm going to right click and just say optimize. And what that does is it merges all those points together. So now when I go back to face and I move this, it'll move the entire thing. Okay, so if you find your stuff is splitting apart, which happens a lot, you just have to merge or optimize way down here in the bottom. Optimize that to link in. Okay, so now I'm going to basically position this juice where I want it to be. So let's say about here, and I'm going to scale it up so that it fits the glass. So I'm going to bring it to right about there. That's good. Now I need to see the inside of this, so if I go to display, I can say, let me see the lines. And now I can see basically like a wireframe view of this. I can select the faces down here, pull them down, go to scale, and scale it in. And I'm basically just going to scale it until it fits in this little cavity down here. Okay, so I'm going to switch to my other view so I can see it. It's rounded a bit more than I thought, so I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, like that. Like that. That should be good. Okay, and then I'm going to put a bevel on it so that it stays rounded. So to put a bevel, I need edges. I double click the edge, and then I go to MS and click and drag. And then I'm just going to try to match up those two shapes. That should be good. And then I can just go back to faces, back to selection, marquee the faces, back to scale, and scale it all down like that. Cool. All right, so now we have juice actually inside the glass. I do want to also create another little bevel on top of here. If you've ever looked at your juice glass or your drink in there, it actually kind of goes up a little bit inside that. We're not going to do the up, we're just going to round it off just so it looks a little bit softer. If we leave it hard like this, that edge will just read very horribly. So I'm just going to add the tiniest bevel just like that. Cool. All right, and let me go back to my layers, unsolo this, back to shading with lines. Now what I can do is, because I know that the the juice glass and the cylinder are going to be together, I can drop both of these inside of this subdivision group. And you'll see how it subdivides both of these. Oh, maybe there it goes. I had to put that inside of it like that, and then it would do it. Maybe I don't want that. Nope, I'm going to keep a separate one just because of how I'm going to texture this later. There we go. So now I have a separate subdivision for my juice. OJ. And I have another one for my glass right there. Cool. All right. And I can turn off my cereal bowl too. That's another way to hide this. Why haven't you gone away? There it goes. All right. So I'm going to take my glass here and I'm just going to add a straw. So this way I'm going to add it a little bit different. I'm going to start off with a cube. And I'm going to go to my attributes, go to my size, and let's say 30, nope, 50 and 50, that should be a good straw size. Okay. Alright, so now this is in here. Now what I'm not going to do is try to model the straw or build the straw on an angle. I want to build it like it's basically in an unnatural straight up position, and then what I'll do is rotate it into position. So I'm going to grab this face, or I'm going to hit C. There we go. Then I'm going to grab this face up top, and then I'm going to just extrude it so that it goes straight up. Like that. Then I'm going to rotate it and then start to position what I want it to start doing, right? So the straw should start to turn towards the side. There we go. And I'll extrude again. And I'll rotate it again. And then I'll extrude again. There we go. Now you'll notice that we're losing a little bit of volume here, right? Like the thickness here is a little bit thinner than that. So you have to adjust your points. So I go to my points, go to my selection. Just kind of tweak that a little bit. And then I can grab these and just kind of pull that out like that. There we go. All right, now it's obviously it's cubed, right? So it's not round. But when I take this and put it into a subdivision, it's going to round it off. Now look how I did the cube here. So I would need this subdivision. If I click on it, oops, if I just click on it, it makes it. Then I have to drag it into this. But if I am clicked on cube, I hold Alt and I click on that, it automatically puts it inside there. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So it's obviously not looking perfect. This part is really rounded. That looks weird. Most likely the bottom part is also rounded, making it look weird, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my face here, and this last face, I'm just going to delete it. And when I delete that last face, it automatically knows not to round that edge, so it doesn't. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. So I may need to switch to this view so I can grab the bottom face and delete. Cool. All right, so there's our straw. I'm going to take this and just rotate it over here. And then move it so that's lined up. Now, a couple of things that we haven't discussed too much. You'll see that as I'm rotating this, it's also rotating the direction it's moving. So if I wanted to move it basically just to the left, I would have to go like this and then move it up and then have to move this back. So it's kind of awkward doing that whole setup. If you hit W, this changes this button here, changing how we're moving something. So are we moving it in object mode or in the object's pivot? Like if we rotate the object's pivot is facing down. Or do you want to do it to the world, which is this way? That's the way I'd want to do something like that. So be aware of that kind of setting. There we go. So now we have our juice, we have our straw, and we have this. Now we could go in here too if we wanted to just be a little bit more fancy and go to our edges. Oops, edges. Straws here. I'm going to hit K to get to my straw or my knife tool. And I could drop in a couple edges like that. And then go to my move tool. And I'm just going to kind of make sure this is nice and blended. I don't want it to look jagged. There you go, that's good. And then I'm going to take my subdivision and I'm actually going to convert my subdivision to a surface that I could tweak. Because right now I can't tweak this surface because it's just a tool, it's just an operation. Once I hit C, it locks it in and now I can actually select faces. There you go. I can actually select faces and move faces around on here. So if I do that, I'm going to use my edge ring or loop. I'm going to go this, this, this. And if you make a mistake, you just hit undo and then get back to it. That should be good there. I'm going to go this side a little bit more. There we go. I'll hit D for extrude, and I'll just extrude that in. Okay. So now to someone, you know, we're not zoomed up on it like we were a second ago, but to someone looking at our stuff, they'll be able to see that it definitely has some sort of shape to it. There we go. And then if we wanted to, click on this subdivision and add another subdivision, and you'll see that we get those little ridges inside there. It's a lot of divisions for a straw, but you know, sometimes you need to have it. Yeah, that looks good. I like that. Cool. All right, back to this, back to this. All right, so I'm going to finish this up just by saving my stuff, making sure everything is on a layer. As you start modeling stuff and you start grouping and layering things, it becomes very obviously important that you do that and double check your stuff. Because right now you'll see my juice glass isn't on the layer anymore. I've turned off the eyeball and it's not on a layer anymore because of the operations we did to it. So I'm going to grab this, and I believe number 2. Those are all my items. I'm going to hold down Alt and hit G. And that's your grouper, okay? So juice glass group. I'm going to right click on the juice glass. I'm going to add it to the layer. And so now, what? Don't lie to me, you should be on the layer. Add objects to layer, yes. All right, it doesn't want to go, so I'll grab each individual object and add those objects to the layer. There you go. I didn't want that group on there for some reason. I have to investigate that. Okay, so now everything's on a layer, so I can turn off any object that I'm not working on, and then I can work on my other objects as I need to. Okay. The other thing that we could do too, like my bowl is up here, the pivot's down here. I could hit L or click this button, and this allows me to move my pivot because I don't want the bowl to be obviously up there. And I uncheck it and pull it back down. Okay. So now that my glass is done, I can grab my glass group and I can just shove it off to the side. Okay. That way I have this off to the side. I know it's done. I have all my pieces to this already set and go. And then my bowl is going to be the next thing that I'm going to create. Okay. And the bowl is going to be a little bit trickier because we have all this other stuff that's going to go into it. So I'm not going to go over that today. This should be a good enough start just to get you going on creating your scene. Okay. When you come in next class, the lecture for the next part will already be created. All right. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go over some of the fundamentals of what the concepts are, and then you'll be on your own to watch the video and work through creating that stuff. Okay. All right.